Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, your weekly dose of insider DevOps trends, AWS news, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A that you can't find anywhere else. It's September 18th, 2024. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator focused on funded startups and enterprises that helps teams who are overwhelmed with AWS. And we do this by leveraging our over 200 Terraform modules that have been battle tested and downloaded over 100 million times. So no matter where you find yourself on this journey, we are here to help your startup launch better products. If you're curious about how we can help you, why don't you head over to cloudposse.com/meet. Again, cloudposse.com/meet, answer a few quick questions, and you'll book a meeting with me directly. So how can you maximize today's session? First off, our format is very informal. Engage as much as you'd like, ask questions. And if you're curious about any of our open source or tools or modules, this is a great place to ask. And for those who are joining us from the recording, you can join these calls live by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. We'll be posting a recording of today's session to our YouTube channel. If you want to share this recording with your team, that's a great way to do it. Go to youtube.com/cloudposse in a few hours, and you'll find it there. Again, youtube.com/cloudposse. All right, let's get into some news and announcements. Oops. All right, first one is a correction. For those of you who were on office hours last week, I was so ecstatic because, I had discovered the AWS ECS CLI. And, this is a project with thousands of stars and somehow had totally eluded me or had it. Maybe the reason why I never use it was because it turns out that that project was abandoned. There's no mention of that in the README. And the README at the top actually promotes that it is like, officially like 1.0, is now generally available is the last mention. But as others have pointed out, there's an issue here if you look through it. But this is basically an abandoned project. And the project also then recommends to just use the Docker Compose functionality in the native Docker CLI, which we all know has been deprecated and no longer exists, even in the Docker CLI. So we're back to square one. There's no options for Docker Compose files other than uh, you know, self-implemented hacker. All right. Any questions on that before I move on? All right, next one here. This was something, Matt, you brought up last night. I haven't had a chance to read through this one. Were there some highlights of 3.0 that you could point out of Prometheus? Oh, you're muted, Matt, by the way.
Yeah, you accidentally. Well, I guess when you start the recording, it muted me. Um, anyway, the things that are in that box where it says new UI, remote right, oh, up a little bit to the right next to what's new. So that's kind of like the highlights of what they've said. But the if you look at that paragraph under what's new, it says there have been over 7,500 commits since
Wow.
Prometheus 2 came out. So clearly there's a lot of change. But those things that they wrote there are kind of like the breaking changes of the highlights. So like they completely redid the UI. Um, they have some native, like the native histograms look pretty cool. It now supports OTel natively for collection, and a bunch of other things. I mean, there's a lot when you kind of like dig through it all. But I think it's interesting that, they now have a beta of the next major release, 7 years later, which was kind of my like, whoa,
That
that's a long time between major releases. So
is.
thought that was
And,
interesting.
and for Poplar of such enormous success, at least perceived success. So,
Yeah, I mean, and obviously it's like, a CNCF project and all of that kind of thing, and it's used all over the place. So
yeah.
um, the big disclaimer is don't just don't install it on production systems now. That's what they say, but they want you to kick the tires to, to find bugs, which it always like always leads me to believe like how do you do that? Like if
Exactly, because the
you know,
bugs
but
usually come up.
yeah, under scale like with
Yeah,
scale or load or whatever. But yeah, I mean this is one of those things where you have to be able to send like canary traffic to it or something like that in order to be able to really like kick the tires. But anyway, I just thought it was kind of interesting that that much later they have a new they have a new version of Prometheus on the way.
yeah. Has anybody already taken a look at Prometheus 3.0? Of course, this is just a beta, but has anybody been following Prometheus 3.0 development more?
I mean, it's been a
Oh.
week. What's everyone waiting for?
Well, okay, so this is like beta one kind of thing, like the first. Okay, gotcha. Well, it must have been alphas, right? So, all right. Next one was something just caught my eye this morning. It was trending on Hacker News. It's a de-minifier for shell commands. Pipelining is one of the strengths of command line interfaces. It's something that has carried its way into like modern log systems and Go templating and everything is this pipeline expression, but they can get pretty hairy. So rather than have inconsistent ways of formatting that, this is a CLI that can do that systematically. It's a Go project compiled down to a single binary, making it pretty portable and easy to use everywhere without a bunch of dependencies. So this is kind of, this is what it looks like imploded at the top, which, nice and neat one-liner, but it's masking quite a lot of complexity there in what it's doing, which is the exploded version down below. All right.
That's actually how I always develop these. I build it like the exploded version, and then when I'm done at the end, I get rid of all the like slash
Yeah.
enters and then do it manually. So this is actually pretty welcome. This is a cool looking one.
So
Yeah. Go on.
what does this do? So this like reformats to make it like more readable, I guess.
Yeah, so it converts a one-liner to a multi-liner or a multi-liner to a one-liner, respecting bash or shell conventions for escaping. So
Nice.
things like backslashes and ticks and so forth. So yeah, one little tool to add to the tool chain.
De-minifier. That's great.
Yeah, and we'll be posting links to all of these in the Office Hours channel afterwards. The next one that has exploded every forum on Reddit, Hacker News, and LinkedIn is that Kubecost was acquired by IBM. So they're on a roll here. Previously acquiring HashiCorp. Well, still pending closure on that one, but looks like they're trying to really ramp up part of their portfolio here, buying some uh, open source project. I think
I
Kubecost was partially open source and became open cost on CNCF or something.
yeah, I was gonna say I smell a new paid feature in Terraform Cloud.
Ah, yeah, likely. Yeah. What's next on IBM's radar, I wonder? What do they have in the security space?
I admit I'm
Yeah.
woefully behind on who owns what these days in the space, like especially IBM. I've kind of not paid attention to them for a very long time.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll go for Wiz next.
Ha! Who's bigger than who, though? I mean, Wiz is not cheap, that's for sure.
That's
But
true.
uh,
Well, there
Apparently more
aren't.
than 23 billion.
Yeah, I was gonna say there aren't too many companies on the planet that are bigger than IBM. I mean,
yeah,
IBM's a pretty big one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That'd be interesting if they're the runner-up then. A month or so ago, we released our new Cloud Posse docs. That's at docs.cloudposse.com. And as part of that, we made public all of our reference architecture documentation that was previously reserved for customers. And as part of this, one of the nice things that you have access to if you check this out are design decisions. So basically, within each one of these layers, there's a number of design decisions that are good things to be aware of when you go about implementing your architecture. We just updated a couple more of these design decisions, so that's what I wanted to introduce today. So one was we dusted off some of our recommendations or some of the considerations for a secrets management solution on EKS. Obviously, there are a million ways to do it. And our goal is not to enumerate all of the possibilities, but the ones that we see most commonly or pique our interest. So what we mean, somebody might be asking, why do you need a secrets management for EKS? Kubernetes comes with secrets management. That is true. But if you want to treat your clusters as disposable, more like cattle, then you would be best or served by having some of your secrets or most of your secrets be external to your cluster. At least the secrets, the source of truth for the secrets being external to the cluster. And that's one of the reasons why we've gravitated over the years towards external secrets operator. And to this day, that is our go-to recommendation, is using the external secrets operator, which supports a plethora of backends to source your secrets and write those to your Kubernetes cluster. What's nice about external secrets operator, I think it even supports, it definitely supports SSM, which we predominantly use, ASM. I think it might support even 1Password. It supports multiple other backends as well. Now, when you use external secrets operator, you're provisioning an external secret resource, and that's a resource that's safe to commit to your version control. So what's really nice about this is that you can declaratively express all the secrets your app depends on in your Helm charts or your manifests and deploy those. Now, recently, I was made aware of and, kind of caught the tail between my legs. I was a little embarrassed, but Amazon has actually released their own implementation of something like the external secrets operator, a CSI driver for secrets that supports ASM and parameter store out of the box. Since we at Cloud Posse predominantly use SSM, I think opting for a native AWS supported offering that fits or meshes well within the AWS ecosystem might be a good alternative to the external secrets operator. Now, for those that are optimizing for, general solution that works in GCP, that works on AWS and Azure, AKS, then maybe the CSI driver approach doesn't make the most sense. But look, if you're operating on EKS, so much is very bespoke to AWS to begin with. I think it's a lost cause trying to build the lowest common denominator across platforms. The third option that we like to bring up, and it's interesting because we always try and have like the idiomatic solution or like the canonical solution in our reference architecture, like this is the way to do it. But secrets management has been one of those areas where different engineering teams see the trade-offs or weigh the trade-offs differently. And like when we say that we're going to store secrets in SSM, some of you might be wondering, well, great. Well, how did those secrets even get there? And that's a story for another time. But it is a story I'll briefly address in option 3, which is kind of nice, but has another trade-off. So option 3 is the SOPs operator. If any of you are familiar with the SOPs library, it came from Mozilla. It is a portable library that's used for encryption of any data, and it comes with a CLI, and you can and it supports different ways of retrieving the private key, and you can actually encrypt using KMS and IAM. So what's really nice about the SOPs operator is you have this way of encrypting secrets locally, and then you can commit those secrets in your version control in this kind of opaque manner where you still have the shape of your Kubernetes manifest, but the values that are sensitive are encrypted. So this way, when you look at a Git commit, it's at least transparent in the sense that you know when values changed, you just don't know what those values were. But the downside is, of course, that now you have to go through a whole deployment process to roll out your secrets, which is a heavy-handed way to rotate things. where there'll be a period of time where your secrets in the cluster might be invalid if you're doing rotation. So that's one of the big trade-offs with that approach. Also, I forgot to mention that this is an operator that then runs in the cluster. And when you write the SOPs secret resource to the cluster, the operator picks that up, decrypts it, writes a native Kubernetes secret, and can use the KMS key that you use to encrypt it to decrypt it, and leveraging all the same IAM semantics that you have in AWS. So no hard-coded credentials anywhere. It works beautifully with IAM. So overall, it's a very elegant solution, but it only fits, certain, ways of looking at secrets management. So I thought I'd just pause there. I mean, that's all I have in terms of our options. And one of the reasons or my motivations for bringing it up on Office Hours is other recommendations, maybe from the community that you use, that you like, and maybe we should consider adding as an option.
Well, a few questions. One I was wondering, does the AWS secret support things like Vault?
No, so that, like I said, this is a the option 2 here. The CSI driver is very opinionated, obviously supporting AWS services natively.
Yeah.
If you want things like Vault, the external secrets operator is the way to go. Yeah.
Then I was wondering also, is like the secrets manager within AWS, can you do auditing? So if there was a breach, you could find out where and how, where the breach happened. You could like trace back to where that secret breach happened.
It's going to be spanning systems, but right, you have access. You'll know as it relates to ASM,
Yeah.
Cloud Trails, and IAM Access Analyzer, and all that, what happened there. As it relates to what happens inside of Kubernetes, now I'm not sure what log or visibilities there are there. Matt, do you know?
I mean, the secrets in the ESO eventually turns those things into Kubernetes secrets. So you get the native logging of who accessed like Kubernetes secrets and who changed them and everything else, like just like you would if you manually created a secret. So this is only like the ESO just takes care of like getting the secret out of the encrypted secret store and then storing it in, basically storing it in Kubernetes for you.
But to Joaquin's question though, like with so you definitely have it on the AWS side of it, but then on the EKS side, and this is, I don't know in Kubernetes what degree of access logging is there for access to things like
that's what I'm actually saying is like all the APIs in Kubernetes have the ability to turn on logging for who accessed them.
Oh, okay, got it.
On those things. So I'm saying you don't lose that by using ESO. Okay. You basically can tweak those logs and store them and analyze them just like you would for any other way your secrets got created within Kubernetes.
So I was thinking from the perspective that all backends are not created equal, and that with the HashiCorp Vault, you get a richer auditing of the secrets that were accessed rather than, say, secrets manager. I'm just wondering if I'm not familiar if the AWS secrets manager itself as a backend has equivalent types of features for that on par with Vault.
Certainly not from a reporting perspective. It's not on par with Vault, but the information is there and accessible through Cloud Trails.
You set up a Cloud Trail, you could do it. You could do it
exactly.
Set it up. Yeah.
So it's like, because one of the things I was interesting that came out with Vault of a few things. This of course is obviously a paid feature, the enterprise, but it does secret sync. So if you want to have like Vault as your source of truth for secrets, but then just leverage off say AWS secret, you could just use that and it'll sync back and forth. So that way, like if you had like say SOPs and you checked in your code and you created it in Vault, but then you want to use SSM just because it's simpler, you could do that. And it also does that through the other clouds, but of course that costs money. Vault did add a few other stuff, but it's obviously specific to Vault's back end. But they have a Vault secrets operator, which is something similar. I think I'd probably prefer the secrets operator generally because that's everything. They also have like an agent injector, and then they also have a CSI provider, kind of like if you had a KMS provider. Oh, and another big thing that that I'm skipping over is that the secrets themselves on Kubernetes is just base 64. So that's the thing
No,
that's really important to communicate to customers. It's not secret, and you'll be in
no.
violation in a lot of regulations if you're in a regulated market. So KMS or something else to encrypt it at rest is important. Then also securing and sealing and unsealing that is also important. Those are often overlooked.
Well, there's envelope encryption on secrets, and that's what, yeah, like they are base 64 encoded, but that's not really supposed to encrypt it. That's to, keep it in text format. The envelope encryption leveraging KMS is what ensures they're encrypted at rest.
Yep.
So. But those are great. Yeah, those are meaningful additions there, Joaquin. I really was excited when Vault added the ability to push secrets, so it becomes like the way of managing and promoting secrets between environments.
Yep.
Of course, that is a paid commercial enterprise feature.
There's another neat feature that they have that I'm looking for if they exist elsewhere, but is to be able to have automatic dynamic secrets. So that way, like say your access to the cloud, for example, AWS could be completely dynamic. You wouldn't even know your secret, just be automatic. The same thing with databases, that you could have access to databases and you could create the credentials on the fly per app that needs to use it. And they don't even know the secret. It's just completely random. And so that type of stuff that have that kind of like automated secrets is really kind of a neat feature that I wish AWS would have and others would have.
Yeah, that's really a differentiator with Vault. I don't know many other platforms or any other platform that offers that degree.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
ephemeral secrets are like the holy grail of how you do it, but it also comes with the added complexity
Yep.
and difficulty of maintaining that, especially if you're doing it internally across hundreds of teams.
Yep.
It's a very interesting design to have to go through, an exercise that is. So
And
Zach,
one
I didn't
thing,
know you were
also
here.
other thing is that that feature is free. Like that's your open
yeah,
source.
yeah.
So
Yeah, that comes
that's
out
one
of the
thing that's kind
box
of cool.
with supported providers, right? It's not a
Yeah, of
universal.
course.
Yeah.
I did just want to remind everyone that OpenBOW exists. So there is
Ah,
like all these
Open what?
things. BAO BOW. It's like the fork of Vault, basically, when they went to the BSL license as well. So it's the Open Tofu equivalent for Vault. They essentially forked the
Oh,
code
that's
there and added in, added a lot of the enterprise features to
If you're
to
a
the
Linode
actual.
user, you can deploy it in one click and it works really well.
that's great. I'm
Mhm.
happy. They just made my day on this one.
All the enterprise features have been added. That's super cool. Last time I checked, they
I
weren't there.
I didn't say definitely not all of them, but they have started to add some of them basically in.
Yeah,
This
it's exceptionally difficult to do development against HashiCorp Vault namespaces when you can't keep a license key for more than 30 days without having to go get someone from support, and it's a huge pain in the butt. So um yeah.
is there one off topic from secrets, but is there one for their console for the open source version of it?
not that I've heard of. Also, it is really interesting. I wonder OpenBOW what's going to happen. I mean, it was largely backed by IBM initially, and then IBM shortly thereafter acquired HashiCorp. So,
Yeah, although if you look at, I think right at the beginning, the list of like enterprises that are supporting it, it looked like it got, I forget where it is now. But it got adopted. It did get adopted by the Linux Foundation, and there's a whole bunch of other enterprises that are like
hmm,
contributing to it. Yeah, there you go. So not just, not just IBM
yeah.
anymore.
It's stage one project on Linux Foundation, so that's cool too. Oh, they took so remember how I told you about how they had the Vault secrets
Oh,
operator? So they have an open bow secrets operator.
yeah, that makes sense.
That's really cool. And they have the Helm chart. This is really amazing. And they also have the Vault agent, the Vault Kates. They have open bow Kates. That is amazing. Oh, they took the console template too. They have open. Are you familiar with the console template?
No?
Okay, this is a really cool tool. Now they have this open bao template, which is really neat. So basically, the one of the major problems why like we don't see change config anymore is because of service discovery. So you have that eventual consistency. So you're going to have inconsistencies. So for clusters of microservices or other distributed solutions that need to talk to each other and need to be live, and you're going to have outages, what's going to happen is the change config doesn't scale. And that's why they've been left in the dust. They have kind of a synchronous service discovery. Well, this one kind of brings a, like say, change config light to do templated configurations, but
Yeah.
have it sync to both Vault and console, like Vault for secrets, or just use only Vault or the console. And so console's dynamic has health checks. So what it could do is if your service is not available of a thing that should be web whatever, it won't appear in the list.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of use them together also with secrets.
And you said sync, that's only, it syncs the values, right, from
Yeah.
console. Yeah, locally.
It's
Yeah,
kind of
right.
like what you would do with Docker, where if you load KVs, environment vars, or you'd mount a config thing. So this one basically uses the key values and stuff like that, or you could generate a template from stuff stored in a live source of truth. So you could use console and Vault as your source of truth, and then have this tool get those values from it and then template it up for whatever application you're using.
Yeah. I
But
think
it's
that's
all
pretty
live
cool.
sync source of truth.
Kelsey Hightower, back in the day when he was more of a developer, he wrote a tool called confd that was very cool. We used it a lot back in the day with CoreOS and etcd. I'd also supported SSM, which is cool, but same concept, basically polls for updates from a key value store or some system and when they change.
Yeah, this would be similar, like confd to etcd would be this open bow template to consoles
Yeah,
Vault. Um, wasn't confd used in the CoreOS, I think?
I
Trivial.
can't recall if it was first class tooling in CoreOS or
Yeah, I
not,
wonder
but
if they used it in their Fleet D tool, the like Kubernetes Lite version that they had before they dumped
yeah,
it for Kubernetes.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, see, yeah, they used his tool. So this was used for the Fleet D, and Fleet D basically rides right off a System D. It's kind of a neat little
Yeah,
inspiring toolkit that they had.
in the
And they also
pioneering
use
days of
Cloud in it.
yeah, in the early pioneering days.
Oh, that was a brilliant stuff. I wish it was still around, but
Yeah.
you know.
So moving on to the next topic, similarly was another design decision that we updated in kind of updating our recommendations on how to handle self-hosted GitHub Action runners.
Hmm.
Uh, And I would say there's even additional developments after this write-up as we continue to learn. But one of the beautiful things when you're using GitHub and GitHub Actions, unlike some of the commercial alternatives like Circle CI, GitHub doesn't charge you if you self-host your runners. There's no platform fee for that. You just pay whatever your cost is for administering those runners. There's a few ways to go about it. One of the earliest ways was just simply, hey, spin up an auto scale group with some GitHub runners on there, and you're good. Except for it's pretty slow scaling. It's quite primitive. You can't have different. It's very complicated to have different pools of runners, and it's overly simplified. So many might recognize that GitHub themselves acquired a project formerly called the Summer Winds Actions Runner Controller, became the Actions Runner Controller, and then now there's I forget the new name. There's even a third or fourth iteration of it here, which we've been predominantly using. One of the challenges that we found running GitHub Actions on EKS, though, is you have two problems or three problems. You have that you got to properly configure your scaling groups for your action runners. You have to properly configure runner to scale to have the capacity. And you need to properly manage your network so you have enough IPs for your Kubernetes cluster to scale. And it's a hungry beast when it comes to IPs. And trying to get the calculus right on all of that is is an exercise in Kubernetes scaling. For the faint of heart, I don't recommend it. And then option was somebody going to ask me?
Oh, I was just going to say, and don't also forget that you need to make sure that you're very careful about the permissions on the various nodes where these actions run, so that they don't get access to other parts of your network you don't intend them to, because they're running on privileged runners.
Yeah, so like one of the really important things if you're if your company develops open source, you never use self-hosted runners for open source. Or if you do, you put those in their own cluster in their own account that is disconnected from every other part of your network, because that's a prime way to traverse your entire network if your runner architecture allows for that. So keep that in mind, and they're not mutually exclusive. You can use the free GitHub runners for your open source projects, and like GitHub manage the security there, and use the self-hosted runners for your private repos, which GitHub does charge for. And the third option is using like the Philips Labs, actions runner, controller, Git actions runner. Oh, yeah. So our names are the third option here is more or less similar to the second option. This is using the new runner, which supports these runner scale sets. But if you are familiar with using Actions Runner Controller, it is a big conversion effort to move from option 2 to option 3. And they threw some big limitations at you. One of the biggest ones is you can only have one label on your jobs, so you can only target exactly one worker group. So if you have like if you want to try and come up with the perfect runner group for your workloads, you have to start defining just a ton of specialized runner pools, and it doesn't work well. There's a feature request for this, and they're talking about it in the community, how to solve it. But we're talking like, I think it's been at least 6 months or longer, and there's no movement, and it's been frustrating us. Plus, a lot of the bug fixes are going into the new version, but the old version is the only one we find that really works well. So option 4, Philips Lab has a popular Terraform module. We support that one as well. Uses Lambdas to spin up your runners.
Nice.
And overall, no complaints about it. It's a good option. We predominantly recommend this if you're not using EKS, since if you're using EKS, presumably you want everything on EKS. And that leads me to option 5. And this is like, because of all the drama above, and I could go on talking for an hour just about this, but I will spare you right now unless somebody has some specific questions. We are now starting to evaluate Runzon, which was recommended to us. And our initial findings are it's pretty awesome. Very low lift to get deployed. It is commercial, but at €300 a year, it's incredibly cheap. Still self-hosted, still CloudFormation templates, still in your infrastructure. You just pay for a license fee basically to get access to do that. And it's really fast and very well implemented, well documented as well. So we'll report back when we have more experience, but so far it's working well for us. Any other users of runzon.com? All right. Yeah, so this is Runzon. All right. Any questions before I move on? Okay. The next one is something that we've definitely talked about at some point in office hours, but yeah, it just always keeps coming up in different projects, and I see so many ways of solving this. But I really feel like there's one nice, elegant way of doing it. And there's a lot of over-the-top ways of doing it as well that I have done in the past, but don't recommend. So I thought this was a nice write-up. Obviously, this is dated, almost 5 years old now, but about the different ways and promoting kind of the easiest way up front, basically, for how do you access private repos in your build pipelines, for example, or inside of containers in a secure way. And this is a way that exploits the ability of Git to natively rewrite URLs to HTTPS from SSH URLs, and then use GitHub tokens to access those repos. GitHub tokens are preferred because now with fine-grained tokens, you can narrowly scope what can happen with those. You can expire those. And well, if you're cloning like the same repo that you're operating in, you can even use the GitHub token, but that's not that practical usually. Other alternatives I've seen is kind of like using an SSH agent, using deploy keys. And I think that's a really backwards way of doing it today, is using deploy keys. All right. Any questions on accessing private repositories from CI pipelines?
The thing that I'm a little disappointed about is that GitHub doesn't give you the ability to
Yeah.
use their OIDC pipeline to get access to other GitHub repositories, a la the way they do to cloud providers.
Yeah.
Like that's a big missing link in my, in my opinion. Like it should be just as easy as saying, give me temporary credentials to this repository, and then you get a token that gives you read access or write access or whatever to another to another repo. That would be so much better if they allowed us to do that.
That's a really good point. Pretty surprising that GitHub supports OIDC to Azure, AWS, Google, but they don't support it to themselves. And it is such a pain point and so critical for any sophisticated CI to be able, for anything more than a basic CI, to access multiple private repositories.
Yeah, and it would actually eliminate this entire like problem that we're talking about right here.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, sage observation, Matt. All right. Next announcement was something that was shared in the office hours channel. Oops. Okay, this was shared in the office hours channel. I was, just clicking on something else as well. But this is an interesting project. This is one of these like a Terraform module as a product almost kind of modules. And I think about this sometimes when, in our module ecosystem, like the amount of effort you can put into any Terraform module is tremendous, and they are never done. So we could never compete with a module like this that implements an architecture this elaborate as an open source module. But this is kind of like the Philips Labs controller module. This is that for a certificate authority running on AWS. And unlike AWS Private CA, which runs you about 10,000 per year each, this one will cost you about $50 and give you a lot of the same capabilities. Obviously, AWS Private CA is natively integrated to AWS services. It's natively integrated to Cert Manager and other things. But I am curious, how well this would work with other things. Behind the scenes, or the gist of my understanding is that it is ultimately managing like self-managed keys inside of KMS, but using a CA, leveraging, what was the project? They're leveraging one of the open source CA platforms, open source cloud certificate authority. I don't know. I forget which one. Anyways, and together with a number of Lambdas, they keep that static key up to date. So the same kind of operations that Amazon Private CA does about renewing certificates when they expire and doing it from a private CA, it is doing through a process of Lambdas. And conceivably, that is all private CA is behind the scenes. All right. Any questions on this before we move on? All right. The next one was also shared in the office hours Slack. Clicked on the wrong one. Here. Yeah, so not an unusual attack vector. It's just it shows that it happened again. There was a TLD that was previously used with a whois service associated with the .mobi whois. That changed domain, and then they let their previous domain lapse. I guess that just happens sometimes. Short-sighted. Are we going to need this domain anymore? No. Well, for everyone else's protection, you should not let critical domains like that fall into bad hands. So they used to previously have .mobiregistry.net and a whois host name on that domain. And they let this domain lapse because they weren't using it anymore. So yeah, fortunately, this was picked up by some security researchers instead, who demonstrated that they were able to do a full RCE leveraging this technique. And also that multiple, what do you call them? TLS authority, or sorry, SSL authorities were actually using that whois server to verify ownership of domains. And yeah, well, if you own the whois, you can own any domain you wanted. So they could therefore, as a result of that, generate bona fide SSL certificates for presumably any domain on .mobi. So not like any SSL certificate, but .mobi certificates. That said, I don't know any MOBI domains off the top of my head. So anybody interact regularly with a .mobi TLD? Just curious.
There's something I interact with that's .mobi, but I can't remember what it is right now.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. The next announcement is last one. Something I found from Anton's Terraform weekly newsletter or weekly.tf newsletter. And there's so many of these. And look, nothing original here. I'm sure 10 other people have tried the same thing. So I'm just going to jump straight to the chase. I think just by reading the headline, most of you know what the author is doing. They're in one way or another piping the Terraform plan to an LLM to get a better description. He goes through some of the things they do to make this better informed. But the end result was, I thought, a definitely noticeable improvement. Still very wordy, but over the default Terraform plan. And what I mean that it's better is that it adds somewhat of the intent. So not just that these resources are changing, but why are they changing? Or, kind of what about the preceding changes in the Terraform is causing this to happen? And this was the sample output there if you were searching for it. Clearly, this is in Markdown format, and it's not rendering very nicely in the browser on the blog here, but I just guess that would look nicer on GitHub. All right. That's all I got. Let's see. Any announcements in the Zoom chat?
I was just going to say in Zoom, I just posted a list of some very popular sites that are using .mobi for their mobile applications.
Yeah,
those are
Facebook
the
is
top 10 domains. Facebook, ESPN, the BBC, Adidas, Zagat, CNN, weather.com, MySpace, whether that exists still, Flickr, like lots of pretty popular services.
So this means that through that hack, they could have generated a TLS certificate for any one of these domains, and therefore, carried out a pretty nice, man-in-the-middle type attack or otherwise.
Yeah. ESPN.mobi was what I was thinking of that I used all the time. Like when I go, I get redirected to like their mobile site that way.
All right. All right, let's move over to Q&A. Any questions lined up for us today?
I have one.
Go for it.
Hello. Um, uh, I uh, I have something to ask for. I used before working in a company to migrate a stack. The startup was giving me the task of migrating stack from GCP to AWS. Um, They did that because they ran out of GCP credits. So you know that every cloud provider give startups certain of credits to use it. I thought at first that maybe this is a third world mm, country problem. I mean, like just in Tunisia, maybe just startups in Tunisia are doing that. But until I met someone, he's one of my friends. He live in Tunisia, but he work in with a company, AI company in USA. And I asked him about his MLOps things. He said that they are also migrating from AWS to Azure to save the cloud costs and stuff. So my question was, my question is that a common thing between startups do that? I mean, to migrate between cloud providers just to save costs?
Yeah.
And my second question is, can we leverage Kubernetes to do that? I mean, like Kubernetes at first is a cloud agnostic one, and but during my research, uh, I found that a certain time you will be limited to uh, the cloud provider you are hosting in or you're deploying in. Like you cannot create, I mean, look at, you cannot migrate any case cluster to GKE that easy, especially with dealing with EAMs, especially
Yeah.
with dealing with more storage. It may be easy for using CSI, I think, container storage interface. Secrets also may be easy, but yeah, for certain things it may be hard. So yeah, to summarize, my question is, can we design an architecture, a Kubernetes one, of course, that will allow our customers to benefit from the strong feature of each of individual public cloud providers without a long-term vendor lock-in?
I think this has always been kind of you know, the myth or the hope of cloud is that you could build an architecture in a cloud agnostic way and, have some mobility there or portability across clouds. And I think the reality is very different. First of all, Kubernetes is great, but for most companies, it's, a small percentage of the overall reliance that you have on the underlying platform. And if we're talking about AWS, yeah, you're using Kubernetes, but you're also, as the sophistication of the application grows, leveraging a lot of other AWS services. All right, so you can set as a corporate policy, hey, we're only going to use things that can be done in a cloud, agnostic kind of way. And now you're also then hamstringing yourself to only using the lowest common denominator and not leveraging the strengths of each individual cloud. I think that as in the early stages, perhaps it is feasible that you could have some mobility there, but also at the early stages, Google Cloud, AWS, Azure, they're not going to throw tons and tons of money at you justifying such a move. They want to see significant cloud spend to justify giving any credits. It is interesting the question you bring up. I don't know where it was. I think it was in Hacker News. I read a comment somewhere. I thought it was an interesting one. I don't know if it's true or not, but I was food for thought. It went something like this, and I'm paraphrasing. Experienced multi-time founders know about cloud credits. So they start on Azure because they know they're not going to end up there. Then they move to GCP and get their next round of credits, saying that they're going to move from Azure to GCP. But their last round of credits is from AWS because that's where they want to stay. So so they're kind of exploiting, hacking the system, like almost like you do with credit cards, right? To get the 100,000 miles by signing up, and then closing the card as soon as you use it, or meet the minimums. Um, I think it sounds overly pretty or like overly neat. I think the reality is very messy. And most of those, hey, Google just gave us $1 million to move our $1 million worth of credits to move our infrastructure over from AWS to GCP. And it's how you play the books, right? The financials, because it will show up as savings in one way, but it'll be a cost in another. And so then you end up spending $3 million in compensation to do the migration to save $1 million. And are you really ahead? No.
So
Yeah.
too long didn't read. It depends.
Yeah, well, yeah. Long and short of it, it depends. But honestly, I think in the end, I don't know. I think the general answer would be no. It doesn't
Yeah,
work out. And on a case by case, yeah, you might make it work out, but is it worth the effort? Or the savings
I,
great enough? And
I
the risk
think
tremendous.
I would add that it's a lot closer than before, with just pure VMs, having a cloud orchestration that has abstractions. But the thing is like anything, Kubernetes is in constant evolution. And so it has a lot of abstractions in there, but we haven't necessarily as a community figured out all the best abstractions and metaphors for different clouds or different environments. The case in point is like Ingress versus the Gateway API. Gateway API is going to be the one going forward. Part of that embedded into that interface is the separations concerns. So before, let's say with the Ingress, you have to be ops heavy and you have to handle every type of, say, developer requests and support all the different types of developer environments. So it wasn't easy to shift left. But now that you could separate out the concerns, you can have part of the dev teams develop certain parts of the abstractions, whereas the ops handles the other types of abstractions. And where that kind of like leads into Kubernetes is like a lot of times you'll see when you get into very specific like implementations, like a load balancer, for example, if the abstractions aren't there, you're going to see really a lot of annotations. The
Yeah,
annotations will just rise up. But when they have really good abstractions and APIs, then the annotations aren't needed as much for those niche nuanced features. So that's kind of like it's a constant evolution. So I say we've made a lot of progress where we have those abstractions there, but there's still a long journey ahead to go. And then also too, there's a conflict of interest because, like the cloud vendors are not necessarily going to want to put the effort and money into making something obviously portable off their platform. They're just not interested. The community is, but they're not. So you have that kind of tug of war.
I think that's a great
Mhm.
observation. Looking at the length of annotations to determine the portability of a resource.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think one thing
my
is,
initial.
oh, I was thinking
Yeah,
also
sorry.
service meshes kind of also help kind of get you there because those are cross
Yeah.
platforms. So if you could take things like newer alternative network CNI drivers like Cilium, or in combination with a service mesh, you can get part of the abstraction forklifting to be able to go portable between different cloud vendors. So you get a little bit of abstraction. But it's like this depends in the complexity that your team could absorb and the cost and all that. So and then there's another conflict of interest. The business managers don't, or businesses don't want to pay for that, expertise. They want a canned solution.
Okay. Yeah. My initial thought was like leveraging the open source community projects. Or that will, I mean, like get you a free pass for each cloud provider. But I think I think things will get complicated more for when we talk about stateful set. I mean, when we talk about storage, when we talk about EAMs. Yeah, those kind of things. I
And
don't
open
know. I didn't
source is
find
not
any
free.
like a cloud. I didn't find any like a cloud agnostic EM project. To be honest,
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't think
on
there
the
is one.
stateful sets,
Or
that's the one kind of exception. It's interesting because the stateful sets are pretty much ubiquitous to an extent. You get into some things like, does the underlying driver from Google or Amazon support excising to resize it? Some do, some don't.
Mhm.
So there is some of that, and also depends on the driver or the feature you implement when you install the thing. But because the cloud vendors don't really have a stateful set auto scaling that's easy to use and without headaches, Kubernetes is one of the few games in town that actually supports stateful sets and auto scaling. There's just not a lot of solutions out there. Maybe Swarm, maybe Nomad, but pretty much Kubernetes is the only game in town for that. You can't do this in ASG, period. And because of that,
Mhm.
that's one of the pieces that is actually portable across all three or multiple cloud providers. Ironically,
Okay.
I think it's ironic.
Okay.
So there,
Thanks.
you have to correct me, or you have to inform me there, Joaquin. I've seen third-party operators to help you scale stateful
Yep.
sets, but I haven't seen but Kubernetes natively doesn't scale stateful sets, right?
No, I actually, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. But I mean, as far as like say, if I want to deploy like a 5 node, maybe I don't know if it's going to be an HPA or something that will automatically scale it. But if I want to make a 5 node cluster and those clusters have unique pieces of, one means one, two means two, you could do that in Kubernetes. You can't do that with ASG out of the box. You just
Yeah, I
cannot do it.
got you. Yeah,
Um,
ASGs don't have the concept of a stateful set.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
Portworx did offer a solution where they might use HashiCorp console and some type of driver outside of the whole thing that kind of reattach the volumes automatically. But they natively didn't have it, and I think Portworx dumped it because they said, obviously they have Kubernetes solutions, so they said just say go to Kubernetes. It's not worth the headache to try to do it in ASG because just the interest wasn't there.
Yeah, Eric, for what it's worth, I think you can actually use HPA to auto scale stateful sets.
Really?
You
Pretty
can
sure.
if you don't abstract the storage layer correctly, you'll break it. When you scale out, it breaks.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of those kind of gotchas all over Kubernetes, but like just from a technology perspective, you can scale a stateful set with, you know, for sure with HPA. I'm sure Kata can also do it.
I mean, the scaling will be on the same region or will be multiple regions. Will not be a problem or
Basically,
multi-cluster.
when you do scale, you can like set anything you want in the manifest, basically as the like all that you can tweak all of the different parameters that are within the manifest as part of your scaling configuration. So whatever you can do kind of in native Kubernetes, you should be able to do dynamically using either HPA or Kata in this case, as Eric was showing.
Yeah. Data's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm always impressed.
It also it's also one of those ones where when something goes wrong, it's really hard to figure out what the hell went wrong. There's like
It's really cool when it works, is
yeah,
how I describe it. Yeah.
yeah. It's we had a customer doing some really crazy Kata scaling for customer dedicated like they're a SaaS provider and they build a namespace per customer and then they scale up and down all of their application based on the customer's usage and demand and everything. And we did a bunch of work with that and it got really complicated to troubleshoot when something was not what we expected was happening. But um when it works, it's really cool.
All right. Let's see. Well, we are at time for today. Thanks everyone for the conversation. I enjoyed that. We'll be posting a recording of this session to our Office Hours channel in a couple of hours. So check that out and share it with your team. If you're interested in working with Cloud Posse at your business, reach out at cloudposse.com/meet. Again, cloudposse.com/meet. Answer a few quick questions and you'll book a meeting with me directly. Here are some other ways you can get more involved with the Cloud Posse community. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, go do that, youtube.com/cloudposse. We post these office hours there every week, as well as a syndication of this to our podcast, which is podcast.cloudposse.com. So you can listen to office hours however you listen to your podcasts. We have a registration link. If you haven't joined us live for office hours, go to cloudposse.com/office hours and register. You'll get an invitation there. Forgive Google if you get a barrage of emails the first time you sign up. That's just how the Google group is working, I guess. We have a newsletter. It's newsletter.cloudposse.com. It's all the interesting links that we talk about every week. We syndicate those out on the newsletter, and that's a weekly newsletter. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and see you next week. Same time, same place.